Hello, good afternoon. Michael Wynn, Chief Digital Officer of Digital Ops, a division of RB Oppenheim Associates. Welcome to the Digital Marketing Podcast and video series, where we talk about digital marketing strategies and tactics to help grow your business. Today, I'm really excited to talk about something that we've been really going deep dive into the strategy of content marketing and how it really affects your marketing in 2020 and why brands often fail miserably at doing it. So in today's episode, we're really going to dive into what's the secret sauce to content marketing in 2020 and why do brands fail at digital marketing. So one of the things that we've talked about for those of you who've tuned into the show before, if you haven't tuned in, welcome to the show. We really talk about very tactical, very practical ideas and ways to improve, enhance, amplify your digital marketing strategies and tactics. So one of the premises that we've been building on for the last probably year and a half, almost 2 years, is the idea of we've got to shift away from this linear TV sort of single piece of commercial advertising as our core way of how we're going to reach the masses. Because it really boils down to this device that, is in our hands. This is like the television was to back in the day when the radio expired, right? So like the internet is like the television and the television is like the radio, meaning the way we entertain ourselves and find information is all about the platforms and the accessibility to this information on our mobile devices. And so once brands really get a hold of that idea and concept, then you can start thinking about, okay, how am I going to do things differently? Because the methods of digital marketing and traditional marketing have really changed because the world we live in changes. Like we literally can access the world in our pocket now. And it doesn't matter if it really doesn't matter what your disposable income level is, because literally people of all ages and creeds and races and economical statuses, we all have these devices. The cell phone carriers have made it so easy and so affordable. We will choose to have a cell phone plan over healthcare. So if it comes down to, hey, $40 a month and I can get a cell phone with connectivity to the internet, I'll do that first before I get, dental care. It just is the way the world works today. So let's talk about, let's dive into what is the secret sauce. The secret sauce really is about creating content for the sake of creating an entertainment or educational valued content that's on a sustained, frequent publishing basis as your core strategy of how you're going to build brand awareness. And a lot of brands struggle with that. They struggle with that because they've not had to do that probably ever. And they also find it very difficult to measure effectively if they were. So let me give you an example of that. What we're finding out is it is becoming more and more popular for brands to become publishers of original content. Whether you think of that as long form content or, medium form, the length of the content isn't exactly the point. But rather than being the disruption of the content or the disruption of the show with your commercial, you become the actual show itself. And brands struggle. We often meet with clients, and I talk to people in their industry and friends who are, responsible for their marketing, or friends of mine who own their own businesses, or friends of mine who are executive directors of large corporations or executive directors of associations. They struggle with this idea of, how can we do this, Michael? How can we create this content we don't really understand? But what they're really saying is, There's a couple of things. Number one, they're not quite sure how they're going to be able to report or show immediate return on investment for this kind of content. Number two, they can't attribute any direct revenue to this long form, kind of becoming the show, and just really that lack of measurement, because we'll talk about the idea of, having a show, and inviting guests to be a part of the show, but they don't understand how that's going to work out. And in today's episode, I really want to give some practical examples by industry, and hopefully maybe someone's listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me, that's my industry, or this is how that could apply to my industry. So let's think about this. So how could a brand, attract the kind of clients that they want to attract by creating a show that's really about, examples of people who are not necessarily using your particular product, but people who are actively participating or doing things that are relative to your industry, and the kind of service or products that you offer, or people who are doing or who are, exploring things that are relevant to your local area, especially if you're a local business. And so the concept here of the show might be, a day in the life of blank, or overcoming challenges in the blank industry. And the idea is to invite people who are excelling or successful in that industry type and invite them to be guests on your show. Now, that show could be a video format. It could be a podcast format. I recommend, if you're going to do one, do them both. You can have the video, pull out the audio, and run it as a podcast. So you've got both. So you really don't have to do either or. And then you can have the transcript of the show written. The important part, though, here is with the content, you do not need to advertise. That is exactly the opposite of what you're trying to do with the content. The fact that you are the host of the show is all of the advertising you need. I mean, essentially, you're getting the main sponsorship of the program because you're creating the program. So let's jump into a couple of ideas. Let's jump into a couple of examples of industries and what kind of show they might have. So let's say you're a clothing retailer, and you're a clothing retailer that you really sell specifically to the outdoorsmen, men and women who like to go hiking or fishing. And so you've got apparel or gear that you sell that is used by people who enjoy outdoor activities. So rather than having content that is you or your salesperson talking about the products that you sell, you invite people from the industry who are world champions or local champions of hiking or fishing tournaments, or whatever is related to that specific sort of segment of what your product represents, and inviting them, and then doing that on a regular basis, right? And then really pumping that up. So whether you do it once a week, I feel like once a week is really the minimum commitment that you need to make to this in order to see the results that you want. And we'll talk about some examples of that towards the end of the show. Let's talk about another kind of clothing retailer. What if you sell exercise clothing and or equipment? So having a show about people who are coming on who've lost a bunch of weight is a great type of show. I mean, think about all the reality shows that have been around weight loss and how addictive they are, and how people love to watch that, and how people who have lost weight love to tell their story about how they did it. They could talk about their diet. They don't have to talk anything about using your product. It's just about reaching people who could be the kind of people that you want to do business, and you want to publish content with great frequency on that. How about a completely different industry? What if you were a lumber company? You sold lumber. Well, you might have a show about, this is really fun. You could have your staff every Friday take a set of Lincoln logs, and you do a talk with your staff, and you guys build a Lincoln log structure, and you record that, and you just talk about it. Now that's not for educational sake, that's more for entertainment value, right? And you could make fun, of your industry. And so that could be something that you make with your own homemade show, if you will. And people would love it, and who knows, people who love Lincoln logs might tune in, but people who are, who like the industry would really love a show like that. I know an engineering firm that does that with Legos on a pretty regular basis. And yeah, they got Legos attention. So that was kind of cool. Well, what about this? You could have a show, if you were a lumber company, that features, you can invite deck builders, you could invite, furniture makers, you can invite all kinds of people who use products and how they do their business, and just have them talk about the successes and the joys and the frustrations and the challenges. And again, the idea is you're the one hosting the party that people want to come to. And by having the show and inviting the guests that people think of as leaders that are in that industry, automatically associates your brand with winning, with being a leader. All right, let's jump to another industry. What about the restaurant? What if you're a restaurant or bar? How could you kind of implement this idea of creating content for the sake of becoming entertainment or education value and not being an interruption in content like a commercial? So if you are a restaurant, you could think about having a home cooking show. And the idea would be that you can invite people into the kitchen at your location, or you could go to their location, whichever. And depending on what kind of restaurant you are, you might kind of, segment the show. Like, for instance, if you were a casual dining restaurant, you could have a show about, quick meals in under 30 seconds to feed an entire family. Again, the idea is you want to reach the kind of audience that would come into your restaurant. Well, what if you're a fine dining restaurant? Well, in that case, you might want to have a show about gourmet dishes and how to prepare gourmet dishes. And especially a restaurant, you're really focused on that locale, the local sort of aspect. So maybe you invite influential people or regulars that come into your restaurant that are influential in the community, and you say, hey, would you be a guest on this show, and we'll teach you, how to prepare a gourmet meal. And again, that kind of programming, and look at all the different cooking shows. Like Gordon Ramsay has made a fortune making cooking shows with his empire, right? So a couple of ideas there. If you were a bar, obviously you could create shows about, you could have your bartenders talk about pouring drinks and how to make special drinks. You could have, if you were really focused on, like, say you're one with a craft beer, location, you could talk about how to make home brews, and you could bring people in and show them how to make their own beer. Again, it's about attracting people who are interested in your industry or in the product types that you sell, but not directly selling them. It's about creating content to cultivate the enthusiasm around your industry or around the location, and thus have people see it for the sake of the content, not for the sake of the fact that you're going to do some product feature benefit and try to sell them. That is exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do here. How about another example? Now, this one is a little bit different. I borrowed this. This is a real world example of for realtor. So let's say you're a real estate agent and you're trying to think of how could I get my information? How could I get out there without coming across like a car salesman or just a salesman in general, right? So there was a couple in Miami who went out and they went to all the fine dining restaurants in Miami, and they talked to the chef. They, had a little kind of interview with themselves on, what food they ordered, and they gave their take on it. And after a few months, things really started to increase. People really started to watching the show. Their videos on YouTube just started to skyrocket because they were the only ones that had this sort of, tour of Miami elegant dining series. And of course, they put it on their website, on their blog. And so here you have this realtor that all they're talking about is fine dining in Miami. Well, guys, think about it. Who are they trying to sell homes to? They're trying to sell homes to people who can afford luxury properties on the beach or in the town. And so fine dining typically leads to people with higher disposable income than the average, right? And so they're talking about content that would appeal to the kinds of people they're trying to reach. All right, let's talk about, what if you were a music equipment store? Let's say you sold guitars or brass instruments or drums. You can invite local musicians to your store, and you could record them. They could have an acoustic session. You could have them talk about the instruments that they play. You could talk about all the different things. You could also have them talk about the venues that they like to play in the local area. You yourself could invite some of the owners of the local venues to your show and have them talk about what it's like to play at those places. You become an expert in the local music scene, from where to go, and then you also become an expert on the kinds of equipment to use that would attract artists, right? So in that scenario, the music equipment store, I think, is really cool. How about another one? What if you're an association? Now, we're based in Tallahassee, Florida. We are the capital of the state of Florida. We have literally hundreds of associations. So I want to dedicate this little piece to you guys who might be tuning into the show. So, all right, you're an association, and let's just pick one. Let's say you are the Florida Association of Mine Safety.